to cancel the school year? Oh no.
The only thing that can separate rich countries from poor countries is knowledge, human capital.
It's month 10 since the coronavirus was first reported in Jamaica. Many primary and high schools remain closed, and many more university students have had to drop out because of the financial fallout caused by COVID-19. But just how are our youth faring? Hello, I'm Damion Mitchell, and thank you for joining us for this special Gleaner Editors Forum. Today, Youth and COVID-19. Joining us via Zoom, SANEISHA Parsons, Public Health Inspector and Youth Parliamentarian. ASHLEIGH ONFROY, she is the Public Relations Officer for the UWI Guild External Affairs Committee. We have Marlene Campbell, Vice President of the NCU Students Union, and JOHNIQUE Francis, Economist. We also have several Gleaner reporters and our columnist, David Salmon, online. So let me begin with you, JOHNIQUE Francis, Economist. How has it been as a young person amid COVID-19?
First of all, thank you so much for having me. And I think it's suited to say that I'm an unemployed economist. I guess it's not so much on the negative side, though, because I recently finished in December. But I can say that for me, I have decided to find ways to maneuver the situation. So despite not being formally employed, I teach CSEC math, I can tutor. So I have decided to tap in on other strengths. And I believe that other young people should do that, as you know, one cocoa, full basket. So it's the same thing with the economy. If in our little spaces and our homes, we decide to help our situation and make our small economy in the home better, then we can impact the large and make a better society.
SANEISHA, as a public health inspector, what have you been finding among young people during this period of COVID-19?
There is definitely an issue or a lack of jobs. So persons are struggling to find jobs, as well as persons are losing their jobs. So I would say youth on a whole is struggling, but for persons like myself who, is employed in the healthcare sector, so that's always a viable sector, I'm doing fine. But I am in the streets on a day-to-day basis, and I'm seeing the struggle.
ASHLEIGH, what have you been finding, especially at the University of the West Indies, where you are on the External Affairs Committee?
It is definitely not a period that we are enjoying as students. There's a lack of physical interaction with our peers and with our teachers. So online learning space is a little bit difficult. We are unfortunately a little bit stressed. Some of us are going through bouts of depression as well, because we don't have access to the regular facilities that we would want to. However, we are trying our best to push through, still remain involved in societies, clubs, and associations, and pushing through the struggle and encouraging each other as well.
Well, let me ask Marlene the same question. How are you finding it at the Northern Caribbean University for Students?
Thank you for having me. I mean, like other universities, our students are struggling, especially in this time, we're having a pandemic. It's a new normal. And while some of us may have learned to adapt, there's still some of us who have not learned, to adapt and adjust to the situation. And so it's affecting us mentally. Some of us are still struggling with anxiety. Right now in this period, it's registration period. A lot of students are having financial struggles. They're having problems registering, and, just getting into the start of school and settling in. And so it's a challenge, but, I encourage us all to, push through and do our best to see how we can maneuver this situation.
Very well. And let me stick on that same issue of registration for university students. I have information that the situation at some of the universities here in Jamaica has been dire. In fact, so many students have had to call it quits, at least for this academic year. What are you finding from your peers at NCU in relation to their ability to continue studies during this year?
Well, I'm aware that many students are having the challenge of registering. Many of them are having to, resort to student loan, and so they have to depend on student loan right now to get through university, while others, they're speaking with finance to see how best they can get registered and even start the school year so that they can have a good school year. Amidst the challenges, many of them, their parents are laid off, working students used to work, and no, that was, for some of them, that was the income that they would use for their tuition. And many of them, the jobs aren't provided at the university right now. And so it's a challenge for many of them. But the finance sector at the Northern Caribbean University continues to stay understanding and try their best to see how best our students can get registered.
And as a member of the Students Union at NCU, have you any numbers to support the argument that students really are having it difficult?
Well, I at this point, I don't have any statistics to say that there have been students who have been laid off or say that they're taking, some time from school because of financial difficulties. But I do know that there are students who are struggling, and they have, tried to resort to options that will ensure that they get through the semester.
Ashley, can I ask you to take on this issue too? What have you been finding among your peers at the University of the West Indies, Mona?
It most definitely is a similar situation. Many students have, opted to take leaves of absences because they simply cannot afford to continue their education, because many of them were working and going to school. And unfortunately, they would have lost their jobs, or their parents would have lost their jobs. And some of them also have to resort to student loans. So I can say, personally, I know of many students who have decided to forego their studies right now to seek employment. And where that is possible, they're saving up to, provide sustenance for themselves during this difficult time, and then also be able to continue their studies at a later time.
Certainly at the University of the West Indies, and probably pioneered by NCU, is a program for students to work. Has that been impacted because of COVID-19? Ashley?
Most definitely, that has also been impacted because of COVID-19, especially in terms of going overseas to work, which, many of us as students, we rely on that to raise funds to continue our education. And for quite some time, that has been stalled. So that puts a damper on the ability of us to raise funds and so on for us to continue with our education. So that too has posed a challenge for us. But as was previously mentioned, we're trying to, as they say, take our hand and turn fashion. So we are trying alternative methods to earn and be able to sustain ourselves during this time.
Yes. So let me ask you the same question, Marlene. Has the COVID-19 impacted the program at the NCU for students to work while they study?
Definitely. Similar to what Ashley would have said, students are having a challenge with the work and travel because the funds to get on the program and to sign up for the program is limited right now because, that funds they maybe are trying to see if they can pay their tuition to get through or get registered for the semester. But for many other students, the concern is really health related, where they're wondering, is it really safe for me to go on the work and travel program right now when the pandemic, is just there and it's getting worse and it doesn't seem to be getting better? But as Ashley would have said, we keep our fingers crossed and we see how best we can maneuver the situation.
I want to come back to SANEISHA Parsons, the public health inspector, because another very critical area is that of nutrition. From what you have been able to gather from your peers in the health sector, is the issue of nutrition amid COVID-19 now a live issue?
For Jamaicans, it's always been an issue, but now, yes, I would say it's a greater issue. Persons, well, we can't denounce the fact that healthier food tends to be more expensive, and the lower class have less access to it because of the price. But the good thing I think about it is because the farmers were struggling so much getting out their produce, you found that fresh fruits and vegetables were available at the markets all across Jamaica for a lot lower in price, in just great abundance. So much so that they were spoiling and just begging consumers and potential customers to take them off their hands.
From an economic standpoint, what is the potential, the possibility, if we continue where we are right now?
Like my colleague just said, agriculture has been in a good standpoint. However, I believe that given that we're currently in a pandemic and we know that unemployment is now on the rise again, the first thing, one of the first things that I called my family back home to say when the pandemic just started and people were getting laid off, I was like, what happened to the land space at the back of the yard? Can we start some farming there? What's happening with the chicken coop? Can we get some chicken in there? So as individuals and as different groups in the society, we have to put measures in place to ensure that if things continue on the downside where more of our families and breadwinners are losing their jobs, then we will still be able to at least eat and survive. So though agriculture is not looking so bad, I believe that different individuals should put measures in place to ensure that their families are okay.
But from an economic standpoint, are you seeing that there has been any adjustment or reduction in the appetite for luxury goods? Or have people consciously made the shift that this is a period of COVID-19, there are uncertainties, and as a consequence, my pattern of consumption has to change? Are you picking up any difference in consumption patterns and an appetite for luxury items?
The interesting thing is that though you would think that there's less money in the hands of the people, we realize that in recent times the hotels they have seen an increase in local visits. So it goes to show that the consumption of luxury goods, it's on the rise, it's on the increase. So I mean, I see that as somewhat of it's a good thing and a bad thing. So it's a good thing for the hotels, given that they still have this level of income coming in because more locals are now going to these places. However, on the other side of things, it goes to show that Jamaica is not short of income or money in the hands of the people. What we're short of is really the knowledge to invest, to use our money wisely and things like that. And I have to touch on the fact that it was very heartening to see that when the BPO sector came down, as in, a lot of persons stopped working, that it was so hard for Jamaicans to survive at least 2 months without a job. That for me is something really sad, because it should not be the case where you're working for so many years and you're unable to survive 2 months. Too many Jamaicans are living paycheck to paycheck, not because there's a problem with money, but because there's a problem with the knowledge, the know-how to invest, the know-how to create wealth. So as young people, I believe that we should tap into that more. Better spending habits.
Very well. Well, let me bring in David Salmon here, who is a Gleaner columnist, but recently was a youth parliamentarian and was also on that matter of agriculture and what should be happening, especially now. David, what would you like to see the government implement just about now in response to COVID-19?
We see where several small farmers would have been impacted by the recent rains from the tropical storm Zeta, among other weather phenomena. So agriculture insurance for small farmers is important. Next thing what I'd want to see is certainly more research and development being put in place in the agriculture industry. If we look at the statistics based on the available research R&D that is done in the local economy, around early 2000s, it was under 1% of GDP. Developed countries like China and Israel are spending over 4% of their GDP in research and development. Certainly more research and development in agriculture is necessary. Then another thing I'd also like to see is how best we can provide support for young persons who are interested in looking in the agriculture industry. So for instance, we see where the increase in young persons doing farming that has taken place over recent years, looking at the RADA's information systems. So we want to see now how best we can provide support for our small farmers. I know that the government is looking at how best to provide more land that's available, but we need also technical support. We also need startup capital, that's important, in order to get more young persons interested in the industry and incentivized to start their own businesses.
Well, we're coming to Erica Bertu with a question in a short while, but let me just ask you one more question before we move to Erica. SANEISHA Parsons, the public health inspector on now. There is a noticeable difference with the younger persons in Jamaica versus those who are in middle age and older in relation to how they behave in response to the warnings, the urgings of the authorities to ensure that they protect themselves, to ensure that they wear their masks and wash their hands, and in respect of how they occupy public spaces. Well, that's my observation. I'd like to hear your observation and any idea as to what could really be behind this sort of behavior.
I would agree. It's younger persons more than middle class and senior citizens. I think it's just that we're in an age and a generation where people they feel more entitled. They want to live their best life, to quote them. And having COVID-19, that's something that's ongoing. They don't know when it is going to end, if it's going to end, when they'll go back to normal. They want to make as much out of life as possible, so they don't heed the warnings and they just do their thing. And then we have an issue with enforcement as well, because if they're not going to be properly punished for their actions, for their illegal actions, then why don't they just go ahead and live their life how they see fit?
But there are consequences for this. What are some of those?
All right, so the consequences, they can be prosecuted, they can spend some time in the lockup, but you find that there are so many persons taking part in the illegal acts that we don't have the resources as a government to lock up everybody. So sometimes they get away with a slap on the wrist, and you just have to hope that going forward they will act better.
Erica Virtue, let me come to you with your question.
What exactly is it that young people or the society has to do to get the persons who have this kind of power, authority, and responsibility for them to make the investment in agriculture that is needed?
I can certainly start with that. What we need is to line up where we see the profit motive, because profit is a very big incentive, and the paying the attention towards it. So with COVID now, we see there is no shortage of persons willing to provide support, and the government providing resources to the tourism industry. But now, since tourism is no longer an option, and we see that agriculture and manufacturing, construction are the three areas of the economy that has not experienced our contraction during COVID-19, but has actually expanded during this time. We see where there is an incentive for persons making a profit to enter those industries. I think the challenge that many persons who are in the policymaking decision is that they can't see where the potential for profit exists, or where additional persons can get sources of employment and have a decent standard of living. So if we're able to connect where potential revenues, not only for private individuals, but for the government, and we're looking at how best they can benefit from this system directly, COVID has brought about that situation. So making those connections and those linkages public, further educating people on the opportunities that exist, I think would be able to see more persons investing in that industry.
I'd like to hear JOHNIQUE on this matter. JOHNIQUE, what do we as a people need to do to get the policymakers to act?
So I am in agreement with David. A huge part of it is educating both the individuals on the private level and also the different key persons who can have a good investment in something like this. Because you know what is amazing? I think it is interesting that one thing that I learned from econ is that the only thing that can separate rich countries from poor countries is knowledge, human capital, institutions. So really and truly, if we can get the knowledge into our people, the know-how to make profits from this thing, so that they can support, so that they can make a living from this thing, it attracts more and more people. Because trust me, you see profits and somebody making a profit, it encouraged so many persons to just jump on that bandwagon. A prime example is some years ago when they removed tax from rum. Just look at how much producers of rum we had, simply because persons saw the profits. So if we can do something like that for agriculture in general, it will grow the industry.
So I want to ask if government, is it that government has not put the investment in agriculture that it should, because it, as a body, the government does not see how it can make a profit from investment in agriculture?
Is that the feeling, David?
All right. Well, it's not as uh, black and white to look at the profit in agriculture. Where we need to look at is not just simply a small farmer planting potatoes or yam in the backyard. Where we need to start looking at is value-added production. And in truth and in fact, governments have not emphasized the importance of value-added production. I remember I've spoken to several manufacturers, and each year they say, okay, manufacturing can contribute to the economy being self-sufficient. And to them, it's still lip service that is being said. So we have looked at agriculture, but at a small scale farming level. We have not looked at how best we can facilitate the linkages to see how we can connect the manufacturing industry with the agriculture industry and an expansion of that particular area and focus of agriculture.
I want to go back to another issue we've discussed, and that is the matter of schooling. And I'd like to ask Ashley this question. Do you think that the government probably may be better served canceling 2020-2021 school year, given the realities of COVID?
Most definitely not. To cancel the school year, oh no. For example, we experienced a hiatus from school when the pandemic just began, and I can tell you that several university students, it's as if we have lost the very little that we began to learn. There was an increase in learning apathy, and I believe that if we postpone this school year, the same thing will repeat itself. And in general, because it is a little bit difficult for us to be accustomed to this online schooling, because there are definitely benefits from face-to-face interaction. I think we'll have a very unproductive workforce leaving the university space if we postpone this school year, or if it is that we do not find ways and means to have a more integrated modality in delivering courses.
Marlene, do you share that perspective?
Well, I do agree with Ashley, and I do agree with her. And in some sense, I think that in this pandemic, it is most definitely not reasonable to cancel the school year, because these are times in which they will teach us to maneuver problems or challenges that we will go out there in the workforce and face. COVID-19 has definitely brought a lot of challenges that students are now facing, and it has definitely pushed students to find means and ways and be innovative and maneuver these situations and navigate through this situation. So I don't think that would be reasonable. I do think we should still push through and see how best we can come up with means and ways, as Ashley said, to have a more integrated system. And I see where here at NCU we have the administration has sort of created a more integrated system where among all our campuses, we're having courses, students can choose courses from all our campuses, and this online system has, created that way for us to do that and for students to learn, and to just take advantage of the online learning platform. Though it poses disadvantages, there are many challenges, there are advantages that it comes with.
How concerned are you, though, that the records which are forming part of students' own body of work now will be permanent in years to come and could be disadvantageous given the experiences they have been having as a consequence of the pandemic?
Well, I think many students are being affected, right? But I think if we should go back to a face-to-face environment, no, many students will be able to readjust to the face-to-face environment because it's what they're used to. And I mean, yes, there may be implications that the COVID-19 pandemic caused, and they may develop a lot of challenges that they may have to maneuver and face and so forth. But I think it will help them to be more prepared. And as I said, if we should go back to a face-to-face environment, I think we will be able to readjust and carry on with life.
Yes, Ashley, you may take this on too, because face-to-face may be all well and good, but that won't change the grades which are now on the permanent records of students who have had to be doing schooling in the pandemic. I mean, is there not some concern in respect of the records that students are now accruing during this pandemic?
There's definitely a concern, but on the bright side, it's good for us to notice that earlier on in the pandemic, sure, the grades were not up to par. However, having been in it for what seems like forever, us as students, we have been able to adjust ourselves and we've been able to take education into our own hands. Not to say that prior to the pandemic we haven't been, but the truth is that we're now learning skills and we're now understanding that education really is our own priority. So things like research and our ability to teach ourselves and to really focus on other areas of the curriculum that we probably would not have had to prior to now, to really expand our knowledge base and get into different sectors. I think it's a cause for concern, but I believe that as we emerge triumphantly from the pandemic, employers will also be able to be cognizant of the fact that it was a difficult time for everyone. And so some of the grades that are reflected on our transcripts are not necessarily a good representation of what it is that we are able to produce in certain environments.
I'm just wondering, what's the attitude of young people generally? I mean, based on your assessments and your discussion with your peers as it relates to the vaccine. I know there's a lot of discussion about that, the availability, etc. But I'm just curious as to whether young persons would be willing to take it if it's available.
As just like the older persons, Jamaican people aren't really interested in the vaccine. You will have the few who are ready and willing, but because of the uncertainty of the vaccine, whether for various reasons, to be honest, so it's the first of its kind. You have Bell's palsy occurring. They don't know what else will occur. Some people say the vaccine was made too fast as compared to other vaccines, and there hasn't been as much testing or long-term testing. So Jamaicans are not leaning towards the vaccine. They are not
Including
at all.
your
I don't know
peers?
what's going to happen. Yes,
Including your
including
peers?
yes. It's quite representative. So it isn't a certain, it's not just say religious or affiliated persons. It's not just persons from a lower socioeconomic group. It's not just senior Jamaicans generally are not interested in the COVID-19 vaccine.
Ashley, are the students at the University of the West Indies, Mona, interested in the vaccine?
Well, the ones that I have interacted with, I can definitely say that there is a mixed response. You know, sometimes we joke about it and say, oh, when we take it, this is going to happen. It won't be the same. But sometimes when we sit down and actually think about it, the response is for quite a few of them is that if push comes to shove, if they absolutely have to take it, then they will take it just so that they can return to some semblance of normalcy. Other persons, as SANEISHA would have mentioned, you know, they're definitely against it for religious reasons and for other reasons. They're just generally uncertain. But I can say that the feedback has been a mixed one. So, you know, that is a hint of hope. But I think that with more education of the masses, that the perspective on a whole may change quite quickly too, with more education.
Yes. Marlene, what are you finding at NCU? Is there interest in the vaccine?
Well, based on my interactions with my peer, as SANEISHA would have said, many persons are against it, and based on the uncertainties of the vaccine, they are totally against it, and are waiting to see what will happen next, and if it is that nothing changes, or based on the results that have been coming from persons who have been taking it overseas and so forth, they have totally been against it.
David Salmon, it's almost, well, in fact, it is actually 310 days now since COVID-19 was first detected in Jamaica. How do you rank the government's handling of the pandemic?
Well, I would rank the government's handling of the pandemic as a 7 out of 10. I think earlier in the pandemic, they were certainly much more attuned to what was taking place. I rank the government based on 3 dimensions: health and enforcement, economy, education. So as my colleagues would have mentioned in terms of the health and enforcement aspect, while we are still doing a fairly proactive job in keeping the citizenry informed about the impact of the pandemic, I see that in some regards, enforcement has been lax in certain communities.
I would say that I give the government an 8. I believe that they've been doing the best that they can with the resources that they have, with the affordability, with the know-how. And I think that that is a reflection, as you know, or it has been reflected in the number of cases that we have. I mean, we have a population of almost 3 million persons. And if really and truly this matter was mismanaged, we would have approximately, you know, over 1 million persons contracting this virus. And I think they've been doing a good job as it relates to the health sector. I also think that the quick response in terms of moving schooling to an online modality, whilst us as students, we don't enjoy it, truthfully, it has been for our benefit. I think I give the government an 8 out of 10.
It is clear that the control was for some classes or a certain class more than the other. So whereas low socioeconomic class persons definitely had to abide by all the rules, we saw where the richer folks did what they want and got away with it because of their background. Or well, I'm assuming it has to be because of their background, because that's the only difference that was saying, look at me. So that's why I gave the 7, because you know there are more persons in the lower socioeconomic group. So once we control them, then sure, the risk is going to go down. But I believe rules should be all across the board. It should be a standard met by everyone if we're going to meet it.
So I'd give them an 8, and specifically speaking to the education sector, I do believe that the response to, being innovative with the learning system, I think the approach that they've taken, as Ashley would have said, though it's not in the favor of students, I think, they have tried their best to see, okay, an online system that works for our students and to continue education and ensuring that, our students are learning. And so I definitely give them an 8.
I would say a 6, simply because a huge part of managing the pandemic, for me, maybe because I'm from that lower class, is that I believe that much more effort and attention should be placed on the lower class, the rural schools, also the persons who have to say sell jerk chicken on the roadside, those kind of people. So I believe that right now what is happening is that based on the laws that are in place and everything, and even with school and most persons in the rural areas not having Wi-Fi and everything, they have been out of school since March. It is going to further widen the inequality gap, because those who can afford it, they're continuing school, they're okay for the most part. And in the same light, those same parents who have to depend on the different side hustles, whether it be waitering at a bar, selling pan chicken by the side, working in a bar itself, those persons are out of a job. Their income is continuously going down, while for the upper class and the higher income persons, they are for the most part okay. So just the fact that the inequality gap is widening, that is why I would give them a 6, because I feel like more effort and deliberate interest should be placed on the lower class.
That essentially is all the time we have for this session of the Gleaners Editors Forum. Today we were looking at the issue of youth and COVID-19. Thanks, of course, to SANEISHA Parsons, Public Health Inspector and Youth Parliamentarian, ASHLEIGH ONFROY, the PRO for the UWI Guild of Students External Affairs Committee. Thanks also to David Salmon, who is a Gleaner columnist, and of course to JOHNIQUE Francis, an economist, as well as Marlene Campbell, Vice President of the NCU Union of Students. I'm Damian Mitchell. Thanks for watching.